Hi everyone. One of your classmates asked for a video tutorial on how to work with mediation and moderation. So I thought I would use a lab that I created a couple of years ago in 2023 with a group of Stats Lab students and walk you through that. And if you have any questions about this video, feel free, of course, as always, to reach out for more assistance. So in this example, we asked the students that the New York Times was interested in tailoring their 2022 smash hit word puzzle game, Wordle, to a college website. So they were looking at different factors and deciding how to tweak it. They wanted to know if there is a relationship between how long it takes students to solve a Wordle puzzle and how high their anxiety is. And they're also curious if the relationship depends on whether participants have to share their outcome, for instance, how many guesses it took them to solve the puzzle and how long it took them to answer it with others. So can you analyze some class data to provide guidance to New York Times? These are the variables that we came up with. We actually did this in lab. The first was we asked participants how long it took to solve a Wordle puzzle. We gave them all the same puzzle to solve. They recorded that in seconds. Then there's a variable anxiety, and we asked participants to rate themselves on a scale from 0 to 10, with 0 being not at all anxious to 10 being extremely anxious. And then finally, we had the variable share, which told us whether their outcome will be shared with others. So 0 was no, and 1 was coded for yes. So looking at these three variables, since we know we're trying to see if there's a relationship between the time it took and their anxiety, we also have this third variable, which is a categorical variable with really two options. So this should give us a hint that this is going to be what kind of analysis? Do you think it'll be a mediation or a moderation? It'll be a moderation because, again, this is a categorical variable. So let's imagine that we were asked to see how we would set up our moderation analysis and process using the above variables. So the first thing we're looking at is to see what the continuous variable would be. And that would be the independent variable. In this case, it would be Wordle because we're seeing how long it took participants to solve that puzzle. The dependent variable, or the Y, is to see how anxious they scored themselves. So basically, was there a relationship between how their anxiety changed based on how long it took them to solve the puzzle? And then finally, that moderator or binary variable would be the share variable. Okay, so let's say the first thing we wanted to do was to create two scatter plots to visualize the relationship between the IV and the DV based on the M variable. In the lab last week, we didn't actually create scatter plots. We just ran correlations based on that split file. But so one thing we can do is go ahead into SPSS. The first thing we would look at, since it's the variables of Wordle and anxiety based on the share, we're going to split the data by the share variable. So we'll go to data, split file. And then where it says organize output by groups, we'll bring share over into that box and hit OK. So now nothing comes up in our output, but anything we do from here on out will be based. There'll be one set of output for those who did have to share their results and one for those who didn't. So now we can go to graphs and down to scatter dot, simple scatter and define. And then for our Y variable, we can put the anxiety since that's our dependent. And for our independent, or the X variable, we can put Wordle. We could give it a title if we were submitting this, but since we're just doing this for practice, we can just hit OK. So then in our output file, we'll see that there's one scatter plot for those who did not have to share, and another scatter plot for those who did have to share. So we can go ahead and actually, if we wanted to, we could add a fit line to see kind of what was happening, but we can already just by visualizing it kind of see that it seems like there's a positive relationship for folks who did not have to share. So the longer it took them to do the puzzle, the higher their anxiety was. It's almost a little bit opposite for those who did have to share. They were higher the shorter time it took, and then it got lower the longer it took. But again, there's not a clear line, but it looks like maybe something different is happening here. Okay. So now we have a sense of that. So now let's use process. And this is where I think a lot of folks were getting a little bit stuck with how to run this in SPSS. So if you're using process, you'll need to go to File, New, and then a new syntax window. Then you can go over into Moodle where you have the syntax for process on there. And if you can see, I have this window open. It's really a lot of information. And so what you're going to do is take all of this and copy it. So you can do Command A if you're on a Mac. I think it's Control A if you're on a PC, and then copy it. So Command C, and then into the process syntax window, you'll paste process. So Control V. Then you can one more time highlight it all by doing Command A and press this run button. So what you'll see happening in here is that it's saying it's actually running process right now. It takes a few minutes. It's saying it's running matrix, and then you finally get saying that process is ready to use. Since I didn't unsplit the file, it's letting it know that it's actually not going to use the split file function while it's running process. Okay, so now comes in where we use the shell syntax to do this. So we go back to our syntax window. We want to delete everything that we just ran with process because it can get kind of funky if you try to paste things on the bottom of it and run it all again. And then we find our shell syntax. So you'll find that you'll have access to that on Moodle, but you might remember it looks like this. And we'll just type in what the different things are. So for our DV, that was anxiety. For our IV, that was Wordle. And then for our moderator, it was share. And then we can run this. So now you can see that we are getting a strange looking output. But the main thing that we're looking at to see if moderator is a significant, if the moderator is significant, this line under model where it says INT_1, that shows the interaction. And we go to where it says LLCI, that's the lower limit for the confidence interval, and the ULCI, that's the upper limit for the confidence interval. If these are both negative, or if they are both positive, that means that it does not cross 0, and that would be a significant moderator. If one of these was negative and one of these was positive, it would cross 0, so there's a chance that there is no significant effect. So that's when we would say that it's not a significant effect. Since these are both, they are both negative, then we can say that this is a significant effect, that the moderator does have a significant effect. So there's something going on where, again, if we look at that visualization, it's likely that that the difference between the two groups of for sharing is that, and if we're looking back up at the output, those who did not have to share, it seemed like the longer it took, the higher stress got. But for those who did have to share, it was more stressful in the beginning and then got less so. And you can think about why that might be. There could be different explanations for that. But what this shows is that whether or not folks had to share did actually have an effect on whether their anxiety went up the longer it took. Okay, so that is the moderation. I think rather than doing one super long video, I'll stop here and then show you a separate video for the mediation.